What happened the day after the Amazon Synod? I guess we better ask Jeffrey Sachs, Pope Francis, the United Nations, and Bono from U2? Tonight, from the editor's desk. And now, finally, to tonight's topic. Everyone is still talking about the stupid little figurine that became the mascot of the Amazon Synod. And I'm beginning to think there's just a little bit more to this thing. It all seems so precious that we're still talking about Pachamama. It's ridiculous. Netflix Kids even has a kids animated children's film on the Pachamama. I don't know if you've seen this. Somebody sent it to me today. Check it out.
Oh, Pachamama, your children are all gathered here to honor and thank you for this harvest.
Our waka protects our village, our most precious treasure.
Wow. It's the great collector.
The only one who protects you is the great Inca. This statue I am confiscating.
You cannot do that.
They're taking away all our crops. We'll have nothing left to eat. Great Condor, help me find the waka. Come on.
Yep, and the little hero there is a little Incan child. So they got their pagan theology quite correct, and it's almost like a little video for Christian kids, Catholic kids, about St. Francis or St. Patrick or something. It's really, really weird to see this, but anyway, it goes back to my this sort of lingering feeling that this is all just a little bit too perfect. This elaborate synodal hoax involving the Pachamama. Because what's really going on here at the Amazon Synod, now in the aftermath, it is idolatry, all right, but it's not pagan idolatry like I think the Vatican is playing around with right now. It's not, indigenous peoples and feathers. It's not the stupid little statue of Mother Earth. It is idolatry, but it's idolatry of, in my opinion, of a political agenda. An agenda involving the establishment of a new world order, which is riding in on the back of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And, of course, radical climate change, scare tactics, and hysteria. That is what the Amazon Synod is truly all about. And there have been a number of things. There's sort of different levels of this thing. The women deacons, Pachamama, and all of that. And a lot of it's being discussed. But fundamentally, at the core, at the heart of this whole thing is an agenda that we're going to talk about tonight. It's all about an unholy alliance between the Vatican and the United Nations. And I understand how that sounds. People don't want to hear that, but that's exactly what's going on. And I believe it's something that can be proven. This is not just a matter of opinion or conjecture or wild conspiracy theorizing. And we weren't surprised at all, because we've been covering this stuff for a long time, this unholy alliance, as we talked about in our last program, between the Vatican, George Soros, United Nations, Jeffrey Sachs, and the rest of the usual suspects. And we weren't surprised at all now, when on October 28th, 2019, now this is literally the day after the Synod, the Amazon Synod had closed and ended, October 28th, 2019, at the Pontifical Academy for Sciences, the Vatican hosted a meeting at which the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda was officially enshrined in the Vatican and became official policy now moving forward. Of course, they're saying it's for the Amazon, but that was the whole point all along, to get this started somewhere. And so they're starting it with a little dog and pony show that they've had going on involving the feathers and the Amazon indigenous people, but it's going to spread throughout the world if they get their way. And what we're going to talk about tonight is what we can do to stop this agenda, because it is diabolical to the core. The day after the Synod closed, they had this meeting, and the meeting included Vatican representatives, including key synodal figures, Synod fathers, such as Cardinal Claudio Humes, who, as you know, was the Relator General of the entire Pan-Amazon Synod. It also included the Chancellor of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, Bishop Marcello Sanchez Sorando, whose name keeps coming up. Before I go any further, remember, as we talked about in our last program, Bishop Sanchez, as he likes to call himself, this is the guy who invited Bernie Sanders, the American senator, socialist. I would say this is one you could almost use the word communist for. This guy just goes all the way as far as you can go to the left, Bernie Sanders. Sorando, Bishop Sorando, Sanchez Sorando, invited Sanders, as we pointed out, invited him to speak at the Vatican in 2015 because, as the bishop put it, Sanders' politics is very much similar to the politics of Pope Francis.
I'm honored to be with you today and was pleased to receive your invitation. The Church's social teaching, stretching back to the first modern encyclical about the industrial economy, Re Rome Novarium in 1891, to Centesimus Annus in Pope Francis' inspiring encyclical, Laudato Si, this past year. As Pope Francis made powerfully clear last year, and Laudato Si, we have the technology and we have the know-how to solve our problems, from poverty to climate change to healthcare to the protection of biodiversity.
But let's not forget what this is really all about, because it just blows your mind. Think about this. The Sustainable Development Goals. These are United Nations. This is a United Nations initiative, which is aimed not just at reducing inequality and poverty and tackling climate change, of course, by 2030, the same year that AOC, Ocasio-Cortez, also has been parroting as when doomsday is going to hit if we don't do something by 2030. So even somebody like AOC is just parroting the Soros, Sachs, United Nations, Sustainable Development, now Vatican talking points. And it's right in the language of the Sustainable Development Goals, quote, universal access to sexual and reproductive health care services, including for family planning, information and education, and the integration of reproductive health into national strategies and programs, end quote. That is lifted right from the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, that means abortion and contraception. How else do you sustain the goals of the United Nations if you don't control population? See what's going on here? This is all part of a massive revolution designed to destroy the church first and to usher in a new world order. The elimination of the Catholic Church, I know I'm going long, so we'll end on this. The elimination of the Catholic Church had to happen first before the United Nations globalist New World Order Brotherhood of Man, Freemasonic Brotherhood of Man could ever be established. And that's exactly what they did. And they've got their supporters now. They've got their supporters everywhere. Education, of course, in politics, even in culture and entertainment. This is constant, this incessant. And of course, they're talking about climate change constantly. Entertainers, movie stars, music, rock, pop stars, whatever. Why are they doing this? Because it's brainwashing. They're brainwashing everyone into this idea that don't worry if you lose your private property rights. Don't worry if you lose your privacy altogether. Don't worry if you lose your sovereignty. Don't worry if your borders are suddenly disappearing in your country. The most important thing is to make sure we don't all blow up because of climate change. You see, young little kids like Greta, what was that girl's name? Greta, whatever her name was, this little brainwashed child, out there, we're going to blow up, we're going to die, you got to do something. It's really, really working well. And the Vatican now is kind of leading the spiritual wing of this whole thing, the religious wing of this whole thing, by giving the blessing now to this Masonic New World Order based on things like climate change hysteria. You remember when Pope Francis appointed pro-abort George Clooney as a Vatican ambassador a couple of years ago? That seemed a little strange, right? Well, that's because they need to recruit the cultural folks as well to help them get this message through, to help ramrod this thing through. Francis met with Leo DiCaprio famously, talking again about climate change, the need to work together and all of that. And it gets sillier by the day. Remember Jeffrey Sachs co-authoring a book with U2 frontman Bono and then running around giving interviews on TV? Remember this?
America has pledged 100% debt relief to the poorest countries, as have the rest of the G7. Last month, George Bush appeared to change American aid policy. For this, we have to thank, many would argue, the thorn in the side of the IMF, Harvard University's Jeffrey Sachs, and U2's Bono. Now here I am looking at a rock star and a professor of the dismal science, the pair of you coming together for this campaign. Bono, how did you two meet?
When I got involved in the Drop the Debt campaign, we were very behind in the US, and we had to get it going very quickly. And a friend of mine, Bobby Shriver, said, look, if you want to know this argument inside out, you've got to meet Jeffrey Sachs up at Harvard. You should go there and enroll, basically, which is what I did. And I wanted to know if, we had achievable ends here. I didn't want it to be pie in the sky. I didn't want a warm, fuzzy feeling. I was looking for, a rigorous argument. And then I met this madman who told me, you're asking for this much, you should go the whole hog, 100% debt cancellation, don't let anyone put you off it.
So, Jeff Sack, you said, hold on a second, let's go for the whole hog. Is this as a result of your own experience in debt relief in the 80s?
Well, it's a result of the simple facts, because as complicated as a lot of people try to make this issue, it's really very straightforward.
No, he did. He co-authored. He didn't co-author it, but he did. Bono, you too. With or without you, that guy. Bono wrote the foreword to Jeffrey Sachs' 2005 book, The End of Poverty. It's all connected, you see? They're all in this together. So whether we like it or not, and I don't think it's the end. I think things can be done about this if people would wake up and stop thinking that this is all about liturgical preference and stop defending Francis. He's such a holy, humble guy. That's all part of the PR machine, see? This guy's got to emerge as this spiritual, humble leader who would never do anything bad and who would never lead us astray. It's all part of the PR. And that part is falling apart. The wheels are coming off that thing. And the reality is, friends, if you'll spend a little time researching, that the church, the Catholic Church, is now in the hands of the United Nations. She's sold out to the United Nations. Far left, globalist, world without borders, cabal. It's not just the Pachamama. It goes a little bit farther than that. Francis is a radical leftist. So when you're walking around out and about, talk about the man's politics. There's his weakness. Expose him on his politics. Tell your priest, tell your mailman, tell your men's group, your book club, whoever. Tell them that Pope Francis now is, politically speaking, is left of Hillary and Nancy Pelosi and all the rest of them. And assure them that Pope Francis will do everything he possibly can to help defeat Donald Trump in 2020. Again, Donald Trump is no saint. I'm not saying that. But Donald Trump may be what stands between us and persecution. Because if these people on the far left get their way, they're coming after all of us. Christianity is going to be persecuted by these people because Christianity is sexist and patriarchal. Christianity believes we're trying to get to a new Jerusalem, to a new home, not our common home down here on earth. You see, so we represent a clear and present danger, a threat that they're going to have to shut down. So Donald Trump is your best chance, whether you like it or not, and Pope Francis and his friends will spare nothing. They will go to great lengths to make sure he loses in 2020. So think about that the next time you defend Pope Francis. He's not your friend. He's a threat to the future of our country and to every country in the world that believes in national sovereignty, that defends its borders, and that believes in independence. You see, that's really where we're at. I'm a lifelong Catholic. I'm a cradle Catholic. It hurts me to say this about what's happened to the Vatican and the folks running the show over there, but that's what they are. And so we need to wake up, stop deceiving ourselves, admit what they're doing, and do everything we possibly can to expose them. Nobody cares what they're doing because nobody knows what they're doing, and that's what we need to change today. We need to change that. We need to start exposing what's actually happening. Move beyond the Pachamama story, and let's go to October 28th, 2019. To this meeting in the Vatican, which officially signed an oath agreement between the Vatican and the United Nations on the Sustainable Development Goals. There's no conspiracy theorizing there. And the folks that were at that meeting, they don't care about the feathers, they don't care about the indigenous peoples, they don't care about women priests, and they don't care about Pachamama. What they're working on is something much, much larger and much more sinister. Dare I say, much more satanic, because it's an affront to the mystical body of Christ and the kingship of Christ. Look at what a couple of guys did to the Amazon Synod's big mascot. It's number one sort of subterfuge propaganda stunt. The Pachamama thing. They literally threw the whole bit into the Tiber and rocked the Vatican back on its heels. People say, well, you can't do anything about any of this. Well, look what they did. A couple of guys, we know who those guys were, a couple of traditional Catholics, just walked into a church, grabbed this junk, and threw it in the Tiber, and the Vatican practically had an aneurysm over it. So I say it's time for us to do something similar to the Vatican's globalist agenda. Take the whole thing and throw it in the Tiber, expose it, start talking about it, spread the word. Let's take our church back from these people, right? Because they don't belong there. They're taking it over. And they're turning it into this Masonic brotherhood of man. We have every right to speak against this. We have no excuse not to speak against it. And we need to speak strongly and stand up strong and hard and resist everything that they're doing right now, including what Pope Francis is doing by using the chair of Peter to promote the agenda of the New World Order. Thanks very much for listening. I'm Michael Matt from Remnant TV.